is the cold weather returning? And the short answer, certainly in the short term, is no. These are the temperatures for most of next week, and even if you fast forward to Wednesday, Thursday, generally speaking, temperatures are going to be around maybe a touch below average. These are the maximum temperatures through next week. High single figures, generally speaking. Bit of sunshine could make all the difference. And at night, this time of year, you've got clear skies, you're still going to get a frost. But this isn't really cold air. So for most of next week, temperatures are going to be around, perhaps a touch below average. So there's no sign in the short term of the colder air returning. And if we take a look at the bigger picture, we can kind of see why that's happening. The jet stream at the moment is pretty active out in the Atlantic, but it kind of is weakening across the UK, and that goes really for most of next week. You can see fairly lively jet stream, loving these new graphics by the way, coming out of Canada, but close to the UK it's fizzling out, which means our weather patterns are pretty slow moving for most of next week. The jet is out here generating slow moving areas of low pressure here. And one of the reasons for that is we've got a big chunky blocking high pressure sitting across northern Europe. That's fairly typical at this time of year. Big blocking area of high pressure, low pressure here. Now the winds around low pressure go anti-clockwise, the winds around high pressure go clockwise. So in this setup, you're always going to have your winds coming up from pretty much from the south across the UK. Now in the summer, obviously that southerly wind's going to bring us something warm. This time of year, it's not going to bring us anything warm, but equally it's not going to bring us anything particularly cold. So generally speaking, through the week ahead, we are going to have the winds coming up from the south. There'll be some showery rain at times, but generally speaking, those winds coming up from the south, keeping those temperatures around about or close to the average for most of next week. Looking at the bigger picture then, further afield, what is happening with this high pressure over the near continent? Because here, just take the jet stream off, it's not even that cold at the moment. We talked about this before Christmas, and when we tapped into an easterly, it wasn't that cold across Europe. And again, it's not particularly cold. Even fast forwarding to the middle part of next week, yes, some colder air does come in to northwestern, northeastern parts of Europe, but close to the UK, not especially cold air. And if we look at the actual numbers for that, what are we talking about? Well, again, nothing especially cold. Temperatures in Moscow at the moment, -8, -9. Through to next week, something like -4, -5. That's actually pretty close to the average for January. So it's not especially cold, this air in the east, even if we were to tap into it. Are we going to tap into anything a little bit colder though? Well, certainly not through most of next week. We've already talked about Wednesday, Thursday. Looking further beyond that, then what we're looking at here as we go into next weekend is the most likely pressure pattern. So these kind of mid-red colours are Scandinavian high. So that's the most likely pressure setup when there's high pressure sitting at or around Scandinavia. That's the most likely pressure pattern as we go through next week, even into next weekend. But as we've already seen, high pressure over Scandinavia can have different flavours to it. So you can have high pressure here and we've got a southerly wind, so temperatures close to average, but you can have high pressure here and a bit more of an easterly wind. So it's still high pressure over Scandinavia, but a slightly different flavour, and that would perhaps tap into a bit of an easterly. Now, as we go into the following week, there are a few more of these darker reds, maroon colour I would say, which is high pressure to the north. So it's not sitting necessarily over Scandinavia, it's sitting more to the north. And if we tap into one of those, well, that would generate a bit more of an easterly, but that's a way away. That's the following week, last part of January. Certainly, as we go into next weekend, it's most likely that we'll keep this gentle southeasterly or southerly wind, and temperatures will just be maybe dipping off a little bit. So still around, perhaps a touch below average. I can probably show you that using the temperature profile on this chart here. So this is again using the ensembles when you run through them. This is the temperature for somewhere near Belfast, and you can see actually temperatures generally rising in Belfast next week. So this is the temperature through the day, which is why it oscillates, and each of the ensemble runs, so it gets pretty messy down this stage. But certainly for most of next week, temperature actually generally rising, and no real sign of anything particularly colder. If we come further east, so somewhere closer to Norwich, then we do have a general cooling trend perhaps as we go towards next weekend, but still the maxima, generally those peaking in the mid single figures, 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. So again, not really tapping into anything especially cold. The following week, there is the potential, the possibility of tapping into something a little bit colder. And that's kind of shown here. If we go forward to week 2, pause it there. So this is next Sunday, a week on Sunday, 25th of January, the most likely pressure setups. And the most likely one, again, looking at the ensemble, 17% chance, so not particularly high, but for this kind of range, that's what you'd expect really. And this still has a southerly flow. So it's got high pressure here, but it's more influenced by the low pressure, and that generates more of a southerly flow, keeping the temperatures close to average. There are other ones that have the high more dominant, but as we've seen, these kind of gentle easterly winds, because it's not particularly cold over the continent, that is not going to generate anything especially cold, and those winds not particularly strong. Fast forwards maybe a couple of days to the middle of the following week, and you do have a few more of these easterlies. This is when the high pressure is more likely to be sitting to the north, but again, the chances of these individual scenarios coming off pretty low. And remember, these charts, the colours of these charts based on the average for January, and as we've already seen, it's not particularly cold nearby. So even if we were to tap into an easterly wind, it doesn't scream especially cold. But as we go towards that period, beyond next week, there is an increasing chance, but certainly in the shorter term, through most of next week, we're looking at temperatures around or perhaps just a touch below average. So there is a chance towards the end of January, but it is at this stage just a chance, and we're all just as likely to stay around or below average as we are to tap into anything particularly cold as it stands at the moment.